Sheesh. It always hurts when you get to the point where the suspension alone is the same price as the bike. Fully adjustable front and rear suspension. Alright, what's up guys? So right now I just finished measuring up the shocks. This company Racetech has a form you can fill out, a swing arm geometry form, so that you can measure everything of the factory setup you have, and then you can see how much travel you have, and then based on your weight, your riding style, your intentions of the bike, they will build you a custom set of coilovers for the rear. I also want new suspension for the front. I don't want to upgrade to a modern like flipped fork setup yet. That might be stage 2 of the build, who knows, but as of right now I want to keep it basically OEM plus, era specific. And in order to get the geometry for the front, we got to take the forks apart real quick. On the 1980 KZ705, I'll show you right here, they have air assisted front suspension, and in order to find out the geometry, I was told take the caps off, release the air, and then with these flat spots here we'll loosen that up to get all the air out of the forks, and then it'll get dumped as low as possible, and then we'll jack it up to see where the max height is for the forks, and then you subtract the two and you'll get your fork travel. I was told these bikes, considering they're the limited models, they had slightly more rake back, the forks were a little longer, and they came with much more travel than I guess like a standard model of the same bike. So that being said, I was also told it should have about 6 inches of travel, which in that case I may be able to drop it more than an inch from the springs. If I can do 2 inches, I will, but I was recommended 1 inch. 2 inch drop for the springs themselves is only recommended for show bikes. So let's just figure out the travel, and then once I send in all the information, get everything built, you'll get an update as to basically the best version of suspension you could get, period. So let me get to this, and then I'll update you once we get it all said and done. Also, in order to get the proper measurements for the rear suspension, initially I used a normal tape measure, but they said do everything in metric. So I got myself a metric ruler, and then to get it as precise as possible, we have this, literally a piece of wood with these 2 clamps on it. I don't even know what they're called. My dad had them. He has everything, thankfully. So we did this. Literally hold it up to the center, and then you see I'm nowhere near the bottom of the strut, so I would loosen this little guy up, slide it down, get it to the center of the bolt, and then bring this over and measure it to get it as precise as possible. The more precise, the better the suspension will be. I mean, obviously a couple millimeters might not even make a difference, but I'd rather have it exact instead of having it off and then screw up the suspension. So let's finish this up. What's up everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are finally getting to dive into the suspension on my KZ750. The suspension is fully custom, front and rear, based on my weight, the weight of the motorcycle, and my riding style, as well as the height of the bike, since I've dropped the forks and I've dropped the rear end slightly. I already opened the package because I had to make sure everything was in there that we needed. Super cool. I'll show you in a second. And I also have my service manual right now, so that when we disassemble the stock forks in order to replace the springs and everything, we do it the right way and don't miss a beat. So let me show you what we got, and then we'll get into it. So here's everything we have for the new suspension. We'll start with the fork seal and wiper kit. This is from All Balls, same people who make the wheel bearings and all that. You'll need this guaranteed. These are the air valves that I took out from the fork cap already. We're not using those. Right here is the emulator kit. I forget exactly what these do, but it is recommended when you rebuild the forks. I mean, you're already rebuilding them, so might as well make it as best as it can be. These are the adapters and fork inner bushings. We also have the instructions to assemble the forks from Racetech themselves, because obviously we need to use the factory service manual to assemble and disassemble it, but then Racetech has some special things we need to do that won't be in the service manual. Right here we got the fork fluid. These are the rear shocks and these are for the forks. So this is what we need. So in here we have the fork springs, and this is the spacer. Because we're dropping the forks, we're gonna have to cut this to the proper length to replace the stock ones. And then we got little washers here, and these are the copper washers. This is everything we need. First things first, let's take apart the forks. Alright, so right here we have the fork legs. I actually built the right one first because as I was filming I ran into some problems and I had to figure them out. So I did everything I had to, did it properly, spoke to the right people, and we have it done. So just for comparison right now, they look the same, right? But if you line these up, bolts to bolts, the new one is 30 mils shorter than the old one, which is what we wanted. We probably could have gone shorter, but worst comes to worst, we could always slide the forks through the triple trees. But this is what was recommended to me, so that's what we're starting with, is the 30 mil. Even though they look the same, let me see if I could show you. This is the old fork leg. I can compress this quite a bit, honestly. You see where that fuzzy line is? Right there. I'm able to compress this about 3 inches, even 4 when I actually try. And this is filled with fluid. It doesn't have any air in it, but we're getting rid of that factor with the forks. And then the new one, because it has new springs, which are also shorter, different dampening and all that, this fork leg, what is that, half an inch that I can compress it. So once these forks are on the bike, considering we did lower the entire bike, and with dropping the forks it puts more weight on the front end, these new forks, which I can only compress by hand about a half inch, are going to be much more suitable than the old compression and all that in the old forks. So since this is done, and now hopefully I know what I'm doing, let's start disassembling my left fork leg. So first things first, we need to drain the oil, take off the bottom Allen head nut, which is an 8 mil. I'm using an impact. If your forks have never been disassembled before, these are going to be a pain in the ass to get out. And actually in the owner's manual they give you ways to get them out, but in this case mine have been rebuilt before, so this can come out fairly easy. But like I said, first things first, drain the oil out of the drain plug, which is right here, and then we'll take the bolt off the damper rod and then drain the rest from there. Once it starts coming out, compress the fork. Alright, now drain the rest from the bottom. You can even see with the impact that was a little bit of a problem. There's a copper washer in there that we'll be replacing, so take that out. Alright, so now we're going to put it in the vise. I actually cut up some old inner tubes to use as cushion. I'm going to put this underneath so it just has somewhere to drip. Gotta take the top cap off. So we have spacer, the spring, washer. We're reusing the washer, hold on to that. Alright, well, the fork slider was able to come right off since we undid the damping rod bolt, which is the one on the bottom. Make sure you have somewhere to put all this stuff because it's going to be very oily. Since the slider came off, now we have to take the damping rod out of the fork leg. Also, we're going to have to take the seal out of the slider at one point. So let's, since we have the slider out, dust cap should pull right off. If not, get a flathead or a pick to get under the bottom of it. Nothing too crazy. We have a snap ring in here. You could use a pick or a flathead. It's nothing too crazy, as you see. Next, we have a seal. This seal, I'm going to pry out using a flathead. It will be slightly difficult, so I have a larger flathead I'm going to use. Just be careful not to damage anything. There we go. I'm going to clean this out. Inspect the sliders, or the bushings, sorry. Well, it doesn't hurt to inspect the sliders either, but they should be okay. My bike only has 11,000 miles on it. Supposedly only 11,000 original miles. Now if you look, the fork leg has another rod coming out of it. That's the damper rod. And if you see these holes in the damper rod, we're actually going to end up drilling these out. The instructions say 8mm for 17mm damping rod and up, which we have a 17mm damping rod. I think 8mm is kind of aggressive, but because I've done it, or because I did it on the other fork leg, we're going to drill these out to 8mm, and then we have to drill 2 extra holes, which will be 10mm from center, from the highest hole. So center to center of the new hole will be 10mm, and then offset 90 degrees, so the new hole will be in line with the lower hole, if that makes sense. 10mm up from the top hole, in line with the lower hole. But got to take this out. This bump stop on the bottom comes right off like that, and then you can take the damper rod out of the top. Alright, and as you see, the damper rod has a spring on it. Remember that this is on top because we're reusing the spring, but we're adding a spacer. Wipe this off because, like I said, we got to drill into it. So when it comes to this emulator kit, we got to make sure it fits. This is the whole diagram of where it should be. It's going to be on top of the damping rod and under the fork spring. Alright, so in this emulator kit, you have some valve plates. These valve plates, these spare ones, have dimples on it to drill out bleed holes, so you can customize the way the forks feel. Mine came with 3 bleed holes drilled. I was speaking to somebody at Racetech, and they recommended that we have 4 bleed holes. Also, online it said about 2 to 3 turns for the preload setting, where I was told to do 4. So we are going to unlock or loosen the lock nut here at the bottom, screw out this Allen head bolt till the spring has play, drill out that 4th hole on the plate, and then to reset preload, you screw it in by hand until there's no play in the spring, and then you tighten it down however many rotations recommended, in our case 4, and then you lock down the nylon lock nut at the bottom. So I got to take both of these apart, take out the valve plate, drill out that 4th hole, and then we'll continue from there. The bottom is a 9mm, which I do not have as a deep socket, and the top I believe is a 3mm Allen key. Right now, actually I do have to take this lock nut all the way off in order to get the valve plate off. It is nice that they gave you extra springs to dial in what you want and extra plates just in case you want to go 2 holes or 1 hole or 3 holes, but as I was recommended, 4 holes is what we are going to do. And there's also a couple other pieces in here, so make sure they're in the proper orientation, and then take off this little seat and we'll drill out the 4th hole. It might be a 1/16 of an inch. Yep, 1/16 of an inch. So we'll drill out that 4th dimple and then continue on to the next one. Fourth bleed hole is drilled. See how that's moving? And there's slop. Lightly tighten until there's no play. And now 4 full rotations from here, and then the lock nut goes on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just make sure when you tighten the lock nut, there's that the base is not spinning as well. Alright, one down. Now let's do the next one. Alright. Now both of these are preset, and now we can start drilling out the damper rod. Alright, so this, we'll put in the vise, drill out the existing holes, drill out these 4 existing holes to 8 millimeters. Then we have to drill 2 more, which after talking to the race tech, fork tech, he said 6 to 7 millimeters, even though the instructions said 8. So I did 8 millimeters at the bottom, 6 millimeters for the new top 2 holes. But if I were to do it again, I'd probably just drill all these out to 6 mil, which is a 1/4 inch. I'm just matching this to the other leg, but if I were you, for a 17 millimeter damping rod, keep it at 6 to 7 millimeters for all the holes. But that would be a good thing, because if you ever want to go larger, you still can. Like I said, 10 mil from the top hole, center of the top hole. So it's right about there. And then from there, line it up with the lower hole. About 18.5 millimeter from the center of the bottom hole. I'm making sure it's nice and deep in there, so to be safe, I don't want to slip. Alright, so start with a super small pilot hole, which will be about the same size as the punch. Next, from the 5/16 bit, I'm going up to an 11/16 bit. Drill this one hole, roll it, drill the next. Alright, and the last bit size that I'm using on the new holes is the 1/4 inch. I see once you have the pilot holes, they drill super nice. Now, make sure to deburr these. I use another drill bit just to go around the inside edge. It's hard to get any deburring tool or file in there unless you have a super tiny one. Now to clean up the outer edges, I'm going to use a countersink drill bit, and then we can start reassembling. Then once you're done deburring it, don't forget to spray it all out with brake clean, because you don't want any metal shavings in the fork tube itself. Fuck. So, before you reassemble everything, make sure you take a look at the inner bushing and the outer bushing. The outer bushing in this case seems okay. The inner bushing here actually has a groove in it. That's really annoying because I don't have any new ones. The ones I ordered with this were too big. So these I'm going to have to find some. In order to get these off, just grab a flathead, open it up slightly, and you can slide it over the fork leg. So in this case, I got sent 36mm ones, but that's the outer race of this leg. I'm pretty sure the race where this sits might be like 35 or 34 mil. 34mm exactly. So I'll reach out to the suspension tech at Race Tech, see if they have any 34mm bushings, 34 by 20 by 1 bushings, send back the 36 ones, and then we'll get a new bushing on here, and everything else should be good to go. Alright, so we have a little problem when it comes to these bushings. This is the 34mm, this is the 36, right? So obviously it's a bigger diameter. They do not make 34mm by 20 by 1 bushings. So I was told, check Kawasaki, which I have, and you can only get a bushing on the fork tube. In their diagram, they don't actually show a part number for that, weirdly enough. And then I was told, almost like the same way when you gap rings for pistons, he said pinch it together, cut a groove with a cutoff wheel, pinch it together, cut another groove until you get the size you need, which would be the equivalent to this 34mm one. So I want to finish this today, hopefully. So that's going to be my only option as of right now. So yeah, nothing left but to pinch this shit together, start cutting. Alright, so I cut both the bushings because the first one I sort of messed up. So this is the OEM one that came out. Obviously you don't want that. This is the first one I cut, got to fit, but as you see I took some nylon coating off the corner, which is still better than the OEM one. And then this one I cut and it should be alright. I filed down the inside, and once it's on the fork leg and compressed, it is just about the same diameter. I was just checking if the groove here had a little bit of friction, which it does, so at least it matches the OEM one. But got it to fit, so now we could continue assembling the forks, thankfully. Alrighty, so let's put the good bushing on. Where are you? Found it. So new bushing, as you can see, slides on, but once it's compressed, it fits just like the factory one does, or did, whatever you want to say. So that's in there. Now we have to assemble the damping rod. We drilled all the holes for the damping rod. It's all set to go. Looks really nice, obviously nicer than the first one I did. But first things first, this top out spring, I believe it's called. You can add extra, but in our case we're gonna add a lowering spacer, which is a 30mm lowering spacer. Goes on second. The top out spring goes next to the piston seal. Now since that is on, we can drop it into the fork leg and then put the cap on it and go from there. So this just drops in like so. There we go. Put the cap on the bottom. Then we put it into the fork slider. Obviously this new bushing should fit. I'm hoping it does. Might have to compress it a little. Nope, it's in. We have the bleed screw, which can go back in. This wasn't too tight in the first place, so just snug it up. We are going to put the damper rod bolt in with a new washer, so that goes on. And unlike the factory, we're not gonna douse it in red Loctite. We're just gonna put a nice liberal amount of blue Loctite on, get that screwed in the bottom, and then you torque it down to 16.5 foot-pounds. I forgot to mention, we do need to put in the spring, spacer, and top cap in order to be able to keep the damping rod from spinning. So go grab those parts. Washer, spacer, tighten that so it holds the damping rod in place. Then you compress the fork and then torque it. See? Compress it. And then, alright, that should be good. Now you take it back out. Now this factory spring you can get rid of and grab the new Racetech spring. As you can see, this spring is much sturdier. We have a new seal. Grease this up nicely. Be careful putting it on so you don't damage it. So you can compress it with your fingers as far as you want. In order to tap it in properly, we have 1.5 inch inner diameter PVC, which I had to shave out the outer portion so it can actually sit in the race. And then hopefully it's high enough, and then you just tap it. So you tap it in until you can see the snap ring race, put in the snap ring, and then you can put in the dust boot. So this goes on as so. Alright, that is in there. Could have probably reused the other ones, but the seal kit came with it, so might as well use it. Now, in order to measure for the new spacer, because this spacer fit the longer springs, I don't know if I showed you the length difference between the two, but not only are these much sturdier, you can see there's about 2.5 inch difference. In order to get the proper spacer length, you have the spacer in here, the emulator, new spring, washer, and then because these springs are so much shorter than the initial fork tube, you measure the distance to the top edge of the fork tube and you cut it there. In our case, that is 115 millimeters. So I'm going to cut this one to length and then we could install everything. And also when you get the emulators, keep all the backup washers and then keep the backup springs. In our case, we'll probably be keeping the springs with this preload, but maybe we don't want 4 holes for the bleed holes. We might want to go back to 3. You never know. So keep all these. So it goes emulator, new fork spring, washer, and then the spacer. So as you see, this one sticks out. Mark it and cut it there. And like I said, in our case, this is a 115 millimeter spacer. Now it's ready to go, but before we do that, we have to put in new fork fluid, the Spectro Fork Oil SA20, which the tech at Racetech told me to use. We're going to use that, and then we measure it to 120 millimeters, or in that case, don't make this mistake like I did. When you fill it, fork leg is completely compressed, and then you measure from the top down, and you want 120 millimeters to the top of the fluid. You measure all this without the emulator and everything. I accidentally first on the other leg did this while the leg was fully extended, and then when you compress it to make sure there's no air bubbles, I had it spill all over the top, so I wasted a good amount of fluid annoyingly. But now I know. You learn the hard way. And then give it a couple strokes, make sure all the fluid is in there, all the air bubbles are out. Alright, I don't want to put too much, so in this case I'm gonna stop the ruler or the tape measure at 150, which is on the very edge, and then whatever fluid gets on it I'll subtract. That's at 132, we need it at 120, so not much more. So now, don't kick over your fork, put the cap on, and now we start assembling everything. The emulator, which is preset with compression and everything, goes in first. Next, the new and much improved fork spring, pushing down the emulator. Be careful of fluid coming out the top. Next, you have a washer. Then you have your spacer. So I was told if you ever want to adjust preload, since I don't have an adjusting cap, if I want to reduce the amount of preload, I can always trim the spacer. If I want to add preload, you can always just add more washers, because we have one on the bottom, one on top. So we could always get a set of washers added in however many mil we want without even having to take the forks off You just need the load off the front of it. And now, time to put the compression bolt on. There it is. I tried getting adjustable caps. The company stopped answering because everything with these forks, as you saw, they don't make the bushings. They don't make a lot of other things. So they have adjustable fork caps for every other bike besides mine. And we are done. Fresh springs, emulators, seals, fork caps, bushing, everything you need to have quality shocks. So the very last thing I want to show are the rear shocks. Like I said, this is the best suspension setup you can get. You saw the front. We had to do some customization, but that's to make it work properly and feel as good as possible. Literally better than factory. And with the rear, same situation. These are basically fully adjustable coilovers that were made specifically for the weight of my bike, the weight of myself, and the riding style. So obviously street, intermediate, because obviously I'm not a professional, and I'm not a beginner, but this suspension was set up just for that. Also specifically for this ride height, with the new frame and everything. So there's what we got. I wish they looked more OEM, but at the end of the day, I'm not really complaining too much. So there you go. This is the fully custom Racetech suspension, literally for my setup. Cannot be better. So everything's already set, the dampening, the preload, all that. It is adjustable by about 1/2 inch, as you see up here. It is set, I believe, at the lowest it's allowed to go as of right now. So if I ever want to raise the rear, if I feel like I'm bottoming out or I'm hitting the electronics tray and whatnot, this is what we are working with. So this will go on the bike once we take it back outside and everything is assembled. But yeah, if you want the best suspension money can buy for your motorcycle, go to Racetech. Fully custom, fully adjustable, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed, and I doubt I'll be disappointed either. So I can't wait to put this on. A couple other things we have to do before we do that, but yeah, G3S Custom Series. There you go. Alright, so there you have it for the suspension of my motorcycle. Like I've said, this is the best suspension money can buy. I went this route just because I want this bike to feel really good. The rear suspension I had as low as possible, it didn't go low enough, and obviously it's for a cruiser, so it's quite a bit softer. And as you saw with the front forks, I was able to compress it 4 or 5 inches by hand compared to the new suspension setup we have in the front end. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it feels. Obviously it's going from a cruiser to like a race bike, and it's going to feel a million times better. Pretty sure I covered everything I needed to. Big thank you to Racetech and Matt Wiley. Matt Wiley knows so much information about these bikes, and I couldn't have gotten it set up exactly how I did without him. So if you enjoyed, feel free to stick around, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Do that spring setup, spring main, preload 13 mil, so that's about 1/2 inch, like I said. Sag plus or minus 20 mil, or plus or minus 5 millimeter. It says 20 right there. Yeah, rebound adjuster, 25 clicks or turns out. That's cool though. Fully adjustable front and rear suspension.